Penguin Audiobooks presents Assassin's Creed, Brotherhood, by Oliver Bowden, read by Gunnar Corthery. Prologue. The events of the past extraordinary 15 minutes, which might have been 15 hours, even days, so long had they seemed, ran through Ezio's head once more, as he stumbled, his brain reeling, from the vault beneath the Sistine Chapel. He remembered, though it seemed like a dream, that in the depths of the vault he had seen a vast sarcophagus made of what looked like granite. As he'd approached it, it had begun to glow, but with a light that was welcoming. He touched its lid, and it had opened, as if as light as a feather. From it a warm yellow light glowed, and from within that glow a figure rose whose features Ezio could not make out, although he knew he was looking at a woman. A woman of unnatural stature who wore a helmet, and on whose right shoulder sat a tawny owl. The light that surrounded her blinded him. "Greetings, O prophet," she said, calling him by the name which had been mysteriously assigned to him. "I have been waiting for you for 10,000 seasons." Ezio dared not look up. "Show me the apple." Humbly, Ezio proffered it. "Ah." Her hand caressed the air over it, but she did not touch it. It glowed and pulsated. Her eyes bore into him. "We must speak." She tilted her head as if considering something, and Ezio, raising his head, thought he could see the trace of a smile on her iridescent face. "Who are you?" "Oh, many names have I. When I died, it was Minerva." Ezio recognized the name. "Goddess of wisdom. The owl on your shoulder, the helmet. Of course." He bowed his head. "We are gone now. The gods your forefathers worshipped. Juno, queen of the gods, and my father Jupiter, their king, who brought me forth to life through his forehead. I was the daughter not of his loins, but of his brain." Ezio was transfixed. He looked at the statues ranged round the walls, Venus, Mercury, Vulcan, Mars. There was a noise like glass breaking in the distance, or the sound a falling star might make. It was her laughter. "No, not gods. We simply came before. Even when we walked the world, humankind struggled to understand our existence. We were just more advanced in time." She paused. "But although you may not comprehend us, you must take note of our warning." "I do not understand." "Don't be frightened. I wish to speak to you, but also through you. You are the chosen one for your time. The prophet." Ezio felt a mother's warmth embrace all his weariness. Minerva raised her arms, and the roof of the vault became the firmament. Her glittering face bore an expression of inexpressible sadness. "Listen and see." Ezio could hardly bear the memory. He had seen the whole earth and the heavens surrounding it as far as the Milky Way, the galaxy, and his mind could barely comprehend his vision. He saw a world, his world, destroyed by man, and a windswept plain. But then he saw people, broken, ephemeral, but undismayed. "We gave you Eden," said Minerva, "but it became Hades. The world burned until naught remained but ash. But we created you in our image, and we created you, whatever you did, however much cancerous evil was in you, by choice, because we gave you choice to survive, and we rebuilt. After the devastation, we rebuilt the world, and it has become, after eons, the world you know and inhabit. We endeavored to ensure that such a tragedy would never again be repeated." Ezio looked at the sky again. A horizon. On it, temples and shapes, carvings in stone like writing, libraries full of scrolls and ships and cities and music and dancing. Shapes and forms from ancient civilizations he didn't know but recognized as the work of his fellow beings. "But now my people are dying," Minerva was saying. "And time will work against us. Truth will be turned into myth and legend. But Ezio, prophet and leader, though you have the physical force of a mere human, your will ranks with ours, and in you shall my words be preserved." Ezio gazed at her, entranced. "Let my words also bring hope," Minerva continued. "But you must be quick, for time grows short. Guard against the Borgia. Guard against the Templar cross." The vault darkened. Minerva and Ezio were alone, bathed in a fading glow of warm light. "My people must now leave this world. But the message is delivered. It is up to you now. We can do no more." And then there was darkness and silence, and the vault became a mere underground cellar again, with nothing in it at all. And yet... Ezio made his way out, glancing at the writhing body of Rodrigo Borgia, the Spaniard, Pope Alexander VI, leader of the Templar faction, bloody in his apparent death agonies. Ezio could not bring himself now to deliver a coup de grace. The man seemed to be dying by his own hand. From the look of him, Rodrigo had taken poison, no doubt the same cantarella he had administered to so many of his enemies. Well, let him find his own way to the inferno. Ezio would not give him the mercy of an easy death. He made his way out of the gloom of the Sistine Chapel into the sunshine. Once on the portico, he could see his friends and fellow assassins, members of the Brotherhood, at whose side he had lived so many adventures and survived so many dangers, waiting for him. Part 1. Yet it cannot be called prowess to kill fellow citizens, to betray friends, to be treacherous, pitiless, irreligious. These ways can win a prince power, but never glory. Niccolo Machiavelli, The Prince. Chapter 1. Ezio stood for a moment, dazed and disorientated. Where was he? What was this place? As he slowly regained his senses, he saw his Uncle Mario detach himself from the group of his fellow assassins and approach him, taking his arm. "Ezio, are you all right?" There was a fight. With the Pope, with Rodrigo Borgia. I left him for dead. Ezio trembled violently. He could not help himself. Could it be real? Minutes earlier, though it seemed like 100 years ago, he had been involved in a life-and-death struggle with the man he most hated and feared, the leader of the Templars, the vicious organization bent on the destruction of the world Ezio and his friends in the Brotherhood of the Assassins had fought so hard to protect. But he had beaten them. He had used the great powers of the mysterious artifact, the apple, the sacred piece of Eden vouchsafed to him by the old gods to ensure that their investment in humanity did not vanish in bloodshed and iniquity. And he had emerged triumphant. Or had he? What had he said? I left him for dead. And indeed, Rodrigo Borgia, the vile old man who had clawed his way to the head of the church and ruled it as Pope, had indeed seemed to be dying. He had taken poison. But now a hideous doubt gripped Ezio. In showing mercy, mercy which was at the core of the assassin's creed, and which should, he knew, be granted to all but those whose life would endanger the rest of mankind, had he in fact been weak? If he had, he would never let his doubt show, not even to his Uncle Mario, leader of the Brotherhood. He squared his shoulders. He had left the old man to die by his own hand. He had left him with time to pray. He had not stabbed him through the heart to make sure of him. A cold hand closed over his heart, as a clear voice in his mind said, "You should have killed him." He shook himself to get rid of his demons as a dog shakes off water after a swim. But still his thoughts dwelt on his mystifying experience in the strange vault beneath the Sistine Chapel in Rome's Vatican, the building from which he had just emerged into the blinking, unfamiliar sunlight. Everything around him seemed strangely calm and normal. The buildings of the Vatican stood just as they always had, resplendent in the bright light. The memory of what had just passed in the vault came back to him, great surges of recollection overwhelming his consciousness. There had been a vision, an encounter with a strange goddess, for there was no other way of describing the being, whom he now knew as Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom. She had shown him both the distant past and the far future in such a way as to make him loathe the responsibility that the knowledge he had gained placed on his shoulders. With whom could he share it? How could he explain any of it? It all seemed so unreal. All he knew for sure after his experience, better to call it an ordeal, was that the fight was not yet over. Perhaps one day there would be a time when he could return to his hometown of Florence and settle down with his books, drinking with his friends in winter and hunting with them in autumn, chasing girls in spring and overseeing the harvests on his estates in summer. But this was not it. In his heart he knew that the Templars and all the evil they represented were not finished. In them he was pitted against a monster with more heads than the Hydra, and like that beast, which it had taken no less a man than Hercules to slay, all but immortal. "Ezio!" His uncle's voice was harsh, but served to make him snap out of the reverie that held him in its clutches. He had to get a grip and think clearly. There was a fire raging in Ezio's head. He said his name to himself as a kind of reassurance. "I am Ezio Auditore da Firenze. Strong, a master of the traditions of the assassin." He went over the ground again. He didn't know whether or not he'd been dreaming. The teaching and the revelations of the strange goddess in the vault had shaken his beliefs and assumptions to the core. It was as if time itself had been stood on its head. Emerging from the Sistine Chapel, where he had left the evil Pope Alexander VI apparently dying, he squinted again in the harsh sunlight. His fellow assassins were gathered around, their faces grave and set with a grim determination. The thought pursued him still. Should he have killed Rodrigo? Made sure of him? He had elected not to, and the man had seemed bent on taking his own life, having failed in his final goal. But that clear voice still rang in Ezio's mind. And there was more. A baffling force seemed to be drawing him back to the chapel. He sensed that there was something left undone. Not Rodrigo. Not just Rodrigo. Though he would finish him now. Something else. "What is it?" Mario asked. "I must return," Ezio said, realizing afresh, and with a lurching stomach, that the game wasn't over, and that the apple should not yet pass from his hands. As the thought struck him, so he was seized by an overwhelming sense of urgency. Tearing himself free of his uncle's sheltering arms, he hurried back into the gloom. Mario, bidding the others to stay where they were and keep watch, followed. Ezio quickly reached the place where he'd left the dying Rodrigo Borgia, but the man wasn't there. A richly decorated papal damask cope lay in a heap on the floor, flecked with gore, but its owner was gone. Once again the hand, clad in an icy steel gauntlet, closed over Ezio's heart and seemed to crush it. The hidden door to the vault was, to all intents and purposes, closed and almost invisible, but as Ezio approached the point where he remembered it had been, it swung open gently at his touch. He turned to his uncle and was surprised to see fear on Mario's face. "What's in there?" said the older man, fighting to keep his voice steady. "The mystery," Ezio replied. Leaving Mario on the threshold, he walked down the dimly lit passage, hoping he was not too late and that Minerva would have foreseen this and therefore show mercy. Surely Rodrigo would not have been allowed entry here. Nevertheless, Ezio kept his hidden blade, the blade his father had bequeathed him, at the ready. In the vault, the great human, yet at the same time superhuman figures, were they statues? Stood holding the staff, one of the pieces of Eden. The staff was apparently welded to the figure that held it, and as Ezio tried to pry it loose, the figure seemed to glow and tighten its grip, as did the runic inscriptions on the walls of the vault. Ezio remembered that no human hand should ever touch the apple unprotected. The figures then turned away and sank into the ground, leaving the vault void of anything save the great sarcophagus and its surrounding statues. Ezio stepped back, looking round briefly and hesitating before taking what he instinctively knew would be his final leave of this place. What was he expecting? Was he hoping that Minerva would once more manifest herself to him? But hadn't she told him all there was to tell? Or at least all that it was safe for him to know? The apple had been vouchsafed him. In combination with the apple, the other pieces of Eden would have accorded Rodrigo the supremacy he craved, and Ezio understood in the fullness of his years that such united power was too dangerous for the hands of man. "All right?" Mario's voice, still untypically nervous, floated down to him. "All's well," replied Ezio, making his way back to the light with a curious reluctance. Once reunited with his uncle, Ezio wordlessly showed him the apple. "And the staff?" Ezio shook his head. "Better in the hands of the earth than in the hands of man," said Mario, with immediate understanding. "But you don't need me to tell you that. Come on, we shouldn't linger." "What's the hurry?" "Everything's the hurry. Do you think Rodrigo is just going to sit back and let us stroll out of here?" "I left him for dead." "Not quite the same as leaving him good and dead, is it? Come on." They made their way out of the vault then, as quickly as they could, and a cold wind seemed to follow them as they did so. Chapter 2. "Where did the others go?" Ezio asked Mario, his mind still reeling from his recent experiences as they made their way back to the great nave of the Sistine Chapel. The gathered assassins were no longer there. "I told them to go. Paola has returned to Florence, Teodora and Antonio to Venice. We need to keep ourselves covered throughout Italy. The Templars are broken but not destroyed. They will regroup if our assassin Brotherhood is not vigilant. Eternally vigilant. The rest of our company have gone ahead and will await us at our headquarters in Monteriggioni." They were keeping watch. "So they were, but they knew when their duty was done. Ezio, there is no time to waste. We all know that." Mario's face was earnest. "I should have made sure of Rodrigo Borgia." "Did he harm you in the fight?" "My armor protected me." Mario clapped his nephew on the back. "I spoke hastily before. I think you were right not to kill needlessly. I have always advised moderation. You thought him as good as dead by his own hand. Who knows? Perhaps he was faking. Or perhaps he failed to give himself a fatal dose of poison. Either way, we must deal with the situation as it is now and not waste energy pondering what might have been. In any case, we send you, one man against an entire army of Templars. You've more than done your part. And I am still your old uncle, and I've been worried about you. Come on, Ezio. We have to get out of here. We have work to do, and the last thing we need is to get cornered by Borgia guards." You wouldn't believe the things I've seen, Uncle.
Just be sure to stay alive, then, that I may hear of them. Listen, I've stabled some horses just beyond St. Peter's, outside the precincts of the Vatican. Once we reach them, we'll be able to make our way safely from here.
The Borgia will try to stop us, I expect. Mario flashed a broad grin.
Of course they will. And I expect the Borgia to mourn the loss of many lives tonight.
In the chapel, Ezio and his uncle were surprised to find themselves faced with a number of priests who had returned to complete the Mass interrupted by Ezio's confrontation with the Pope, as he and Rodrigo had battled for control of the pieces of Eden they had discovered. The priests confronted them angrily, surrounding them and clamouring.
"Che cosa fate qui?"
"What are you doing here?" they yelled.
"You have desecrated the sanctity of this holy place."
And
"Assassini! God will see that you pay for your crimes."
As Mario and Ezio pushed their way through the angry throng, the bells of St. Peter's began to ring the alarm. "You condemn what you do not understand," said Ezio to a priest who was trying to bar their way. The softness of the man's body repelled him, and he shoved him aside as gently as possible.
"We must go, Ezio," said Mario urgently. "Now."
"His is the voice of the devil," another priest's voice rang out. And another said, "Turn away from them." Ezio and Mario pushed their way through the mob and out into the great courtyard of the church. There they were confronted by a sea of red robes. It seemed that the entire College of Cardinals was assembled, confused, but still under the dominion of Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, captain of the Association of the Templars. "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood," the cardinals were chanting, "but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armour of God, and the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked."
"What's the matter with them?" Ezio asked.
"They are confused. They seek guidance," Mario replied grimly.
"Come on. We must get away before the Borgia guards take notice of our presence."
He looked back towards the Vatican. There was a glitter of armour in the sunlight. "Too late. Here they come. Hurry." Chapter 3. The billowing vestments of the cardinals formed a sea of red that parted as 4 Borgia guards pushed through in pursuit of Ezio and Mario. Panic overtook the crowd as the cardinals started shouting in fear and alarm, and Ezio and his uncle found themselves encircled by a human arena. The cardinals, not knowing where to turn, had inadvertently formed a barrier. Perhaps their courage was unconsciously bolstered by the arrival of the heavily armoured guards, their breastplates gleaming in the sunlight. The 4 Borgia soldiers had unsheathed their swords and stepped into the circle to face Ezio and Mario, who in turn drew their blades.
"Lay down your weapons and surrender, assassins! You are surrounded and outnumbered!"
shouted the lead soldier, stepping forward. Before he could utter another word, Ezio had sprung from his stance, energy returning to his weary limbs. The lead guard had no time to react, not expecting his opponent to be so bold in the face of such overwhelming odds. Ezio's sword arm circled in a blur, the blade whistling as it sliced through the air. The guard tried in vain to raise his sword to parry, but Ezio's movement was simply too quick. The assassin's sword hit its mark with unfaltering accuracy, slicing into the guard's exposed neck, a plume of blood following its impact. The 3 remaining guards stood motionless, astonished at the speed of the assassin, and idiotic in the face of such a skilled foe. It was a delay that was to prove their death. Ezio's blade had barely finished its first lethal arc when he raised his left hand, the mechanism of his hidden blade clicking as the lethal spike appeared from his sleeve. It pierced the second guard between the eyes before he could even twitch a muscle in defense. Meanwhile, Mario, unnoticed, had taken 2 steps sideways, closing the angle of attack on the 2 remaining guards, whose attention was still entirely focused on the shocking display of violence unfolding before them.
In 2 more steps, he closed in and heaved his sword under the breastplate of the nearest guard, the point rising up sickeningly into the man's torso. The guard's face contorted with confused agony. 1 man left. With horror in his eyes, he turned as if to flee, but too late. Ezio's blade struck his right flank as Mario's sword sliced into his thigh. The man fell to his knees with a grunt, and Mario kicked him over. The 2 assassins looked around. The blood of the guards spread across the paved ground, soaking into the scarlet hems of the cardinal's vestments. "Let's go before more of Borgia's men reach us." They brandished their swords at the now terrified cardinals, who quickly fled the assassins, clearing a path that would lead them from the Vatican. They heard the sound of approaching horses, no doubt more soldiers, as they pushed their way forcefully towards the southeast, running at full speed across the expanse of the plaza, away from the Vatican in the direction of the Tiber. The horses Mario had organized for their escape were tethered just outside the purlieus of the Holy See. But first they had to turn to those papal guards who had followed on horseback and who were bearing down on them fast, their thundering hooves echoing on the cobbles. Using their falchions, Ezio and Mario managed to strike away the halberds the guards thrust at them. Mario cut 1 guard down just as he was about to stab Ezio from behind with his spear. "Not bad for an old man," Ezio cried gratefully. "I expect you to return the favour," returned his uncle, "and not so much of your old man." "I haven't forgotten everything you taught me." "I should hope not. Look out!" Ezio whirled round just in time to slice the legs of a horse from under a guard who'd galloped up, wielding a vicious-looking mace. "Buona questa!" shouted Mario. "Good one!" Ezio leapt sideways, avoiding 2 more of his pursuers, and managing to unsaddle them as they careered past, carried forward by their own momentum. Mario, heavier and older, preferred to stand his ground and cut at his enemies before leaping out of their reach. But once they had gained the edge of the broad square that faced the great cathedral church of St. Peter, the 2 assassins quickly clambered to the safety of the rooftops, scaling the crumbling house walls as nimbly as geckos, and scampering across them, leaping over the gaps where the streets between them made canyons. It wasn't always easy, and at one point Mario nearly didn't make it, his fingers scrabbling for the gutters as he fell just short. Panting hard, Ezio doubled back to pull him clear, succeeding just as the crossbow bolts fired by their pursuers rattled uselessly past them into the sky. But their going was far faster than that of the guards, who, more heavily armoured and lacking the skills of the assassins, tried in vain to keep up by running through the pathways beneath until gradually they fell back. Mario and Ezio clattered to a halt on a roof overlooking a small square on the edge of Trastevere. 2 large, tough-looking chestnut horses were saddled and ready outside a lowly-looking inn, its battered sign declaring it to be the Sleeping Fox, while being watched over by a wall-eyed hunchback with a bushy moustache. "Gianni!" hissed Mario. The man looked up and immediately undid the reins by which the horses were tethered to a huge iron ring set into the wall of the inn. Mario instantly leapt down from the rooftop, landing in a crouch, and from there sprang into the saddle of the nearer and larger of the 2 horses. It whinnied and trod the earth in nervous anticipation. "Shh, campione," said Mario to the animal, and then, looking up to where Ezio still stood on the parapet, he yelled, "Come on, what are you waiting for?" "Just a minute, Zio," said Ezio, turning to face 2 Borgia guards who had managed to struggle up to the roof, and who were now facing him with, to his astonishment, cocked pistols of a type that was new to him. Where the hell had they got those from? This was no time for questions, though, so he whirled through the air at them, unleashing his hidden blade and slicing each neatly through the jugular before they had a chance to fire. "Impressive," said Mario, reining in his impatient horse. "Now get a move on. Cosa diavolo aspetti?" Ezio threw himself off the roof, to land close by the second horse, which was being held firmly by the hunchback. Then he rebounded off the ground to spring into the animal's saddle.
It reared excitedly under his weight, but he immediately had it under control and wheeled it round to follow his uncle as he rode fast towards the Tiber. At the same time, Gianni disappeared into the inn, and a detachment of Borgia cavalry tore round the corner into the square. Digging his heels into the horses' flanks, Ezio sped after his uncle as they made their way at breakneck speed through the broken-down streets of Rome towards the dirty, sluggish river. At their backs they could hear the shouts of the mounted Borgia guards, cursing their prey, as Mario and Ezio galloped through the maze of ancient streets, slowly pulling further away. Having reached Tiber Island, they crossed the river by a rickety bridge that trembled beneath their horses' hooves. Then they doubled back, turning north to ride up the main street leading out of the squalid little town that had once been the capital of the civilized world. They did not stop until they were in the depths of the countryside, and had assured themselves they were out of reach of their pursuers. Near the settlement of Sette Bagni, in the shade of a massive elm tree by the side of the dusty road that ran parallel to the river, they reined their horses in and took time to draw breath. "That was too close, uncle." The older man shrugged and smiled a little painfully. From a saddlebag, Mario produced a leather flagon of rough red wine and proffered it to his nephew. "Here," he said, slowly catching his breath. "Good for you." Ezio drank, then grimaced. "Where did you get this?" "It's the best they can do at the Sleeping Fox," said Mario, grinning broadly. "But once we get to Monteriggioni, you'll fare better." Ezio smiled and passed the flask back to his uncle, but then his features became troubled. "What is it?" asked Mario in gentler tones. Slowly, Ezio produced the apple from the pouch in which he'd stowed it. "This. What am I to do with it?" Mario looked grave. "It is a heavy responsibility, but it is one you must shoulder alone." "How can I?" "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart tells me to be rid of it. But my brain—" "It was vouchsafed you by whatever powers you encountered in the vault," said Mario solemnly. "They would not have given it back to mortals if there was not a purpose devised for it." "It is too dangerous. If it fell into the wrong hands again—" Ezio looked ominously at the slothful river flowing nearby. Mario watched him expectantly. Ezio hefted the apple in his gloved right hand, but still he hesitated. He knew he couldn't throw such a great treasure away, and his uncle's words had swayed him. Surely Minerva would not have allowed him to take back the apple without reason. "The decision must be yours alone," said Mario. "But if you feel unhappy having custody of it now, give it to me for safekeeping. You can take it back later when your mind is calmer." Ezio hesitated still, but then they both heard in the distance the sound of thundering hooves and the baying of hounds. "Those bastards don't give up easily," said Mario through gritted teeth. "Come, give it to me." Ezio sighed, but replaced the apple in its leather pouch and threw it over to Mario, who quickly stowed it in his saddlebag. "And now," said Mario, "we must jump these nags into the river and swim them across. That'll put the damned dogs off our scent. And even if they're bright enough to ford the Tiber themselves, we'll be able to lose them in the woods over there. Come on. I want to be in Monteriggioni by this time tomorrow." "How hard do you expect to ride?" Mario dug his heels into his mount's flanks, and the beast reared, foam at the corners of its mouth. "Very hard," he said, "because from now on we don't simply have Rodrigo to contend with. His son and daughter are with him, Cesare and Lucrezia." "And they are?" "The most dangerous people you are ever likely to meet." Chapter 4. It was the afternoon of the following day when the little walled town of Monteriggioni, dominated by Mario's Rocca, appeared on its hill on the horizon. They had made better time than they'd expected, and had now eased their pace to spare the horses. "And then Minerva told me about the sun," Ezio was saying. She told of a disaster that happened long ago, and foretold of another which is to come.
But not until some time in the future, vero? Said Mario. Then we need not fret about it.
Si, Ezio replied. I wonder how much more work we have to do. He paused reflectively. Perhaps it will soon be finished.
Would that be so bad? Ezio was about to reply when he was interrupted by the sound of an explosion, cannon fire from the direction of the town. He drew his sword, rising in his saddle to scan the ramparts. "Don't worry," said Mario, laughing heartily. "It's only exercises. We've upgraded the arsenal here and installed new cannon all along the battlements. We have training sessions daily. As long as they aren't aiming at us." "Don't worry," said Mario again. "It's true that the men still need to get their eye in, but they have enough sense not to fire at the boss."
A short while later they were riding through the open principal gate of the town and up the main thoroughfare that led to the citadel. As they did so, crowds gathered to line the street, looking at Ezio with a mixture of respect, admiration, and affection. "Welcome back, Ezio," one woman called. "Grazie, Madonna," Ezio smiled back, inclining his head slightly. "3 cheers for Ezio!" a child's voice rang out. "Buongiorno, fratellino," Ezio said to him. Turning to Mario, he added, "It's good to be home."
"I think they're more pleased to see you than me," said Mario, but he was smiling as he spoke, and in fact much of the cheering, especially from the older townsmen, was for him.
"I'm looking forward to seeing the old family seat again," said Ezio. "It's been a while."
"It has indeed, and there are a couple of people there who'll be looking forward to seeing you."
"Who?"
"Can't you guess? You can't be that preoccupied with your duties to the Brotherhood."
"Of course. You mean my mother and my sister. How are they?"
"Well, your sister was very unhappy when her husband died. But time heals most things, and I think she's much better now. In fact, there she is."
They had ridden into the courtyard of Mario's fortified residence, and as they dismounted, Ezio's sister Claudia appeared at the top of the marble staircase that led up to the main entrance, and flew down it and into her brother's arms. "Brother," she cried, hugging him, "your return home is the best birthday present I could have wished for." "Claudia, my dearest," said Ezio, holding her close. "It is good to be back. How is our mother?" "Well, thanks be to God. She's dying to see you. We've been on tenterhooks ever since the news reached us that you were returning. And your fame goes before you."
"Let's go in,"
said Mario. "There's someone else who'll be glad to see you," continued Claudia, taking his arm and escorting him up the staircase. "The Countess of Forli." "Caterina, here." Ezio tried to keep the excitement out of his voice. "We did not know when exactly you would arrive. She and Mother are with the abbess, but they will be here by sunset."
"Business first," said Mario knowingly. "I'm calling a meeting of the Council of the Brotherhood here tonight. Machiavelli, I know, is especially keen to talk to you."
"Is it finished, then?" asked Claudia intently. "Is the Spaniard truly dead?" Ezio's grey eyes hardened. "I will explain everything at the meeting this evening," he told her. "Very well," replied Claudia, but her eyes were troubled as she took her leave. "And please give my greetings to the Countess when she returns," Ezio called after her. "I will see her and Mother this evening. First, I have business to attend to with Mario, which will not wait." Once alone, Mario's tone became serious.
"You must prepare well for tonight, Ezio. Machiavelli will be here by sunset, and I know he has many questions for you. We will discuss matters now, and then I advise you to take some time off. It won't hurt you to get to know the town a little again."
After a session of deep conversation with Mario in his study, Ezio made his way back into Monteriggioni. The question of the Pope's survival hung heavily over him, and he sought distraction from it. Mario had suggested he visit his tailor to order some new clothes to replace his travel-stained ones. So first he made his way to the tailor's shop, where he found the tailor sitting cross-legged on his workbench, sewing a brocade cloak of a rich emerald green. Ezio liked the tailor, who was a good-natured fellow, a little older than Ezio himself. The tailor greeted him warmly.
"To what do I owe the honour?" he asked.
"I think I'm due some new clothes," said Ezio a little ruefully. "Tell me what you think. Be honest."
"Even if it were not my job to sell you clothes, signore, I would have to advise you that a new suit would be the making of you."
"I thought as much. Very well.
I'll measure you now. Then you can pick out the colours you'd like."
Ezio submitted himself to the tailor's ministrations and chose a discreet dark grey velvet for the doublet, with matching hose in wool. "Can it be ready by tonight?"
The tailor smiled. "Not if you want me to do a good job of it, signore. But we can try for a fitting towards midday tomorrow."
"Very well," replied Ezio, hoping that the meeting he was to attend that evening would not result in his having to leave Monteriggioni immediately. He was making his way across the town's main square when he noticed an attractive woman struggling with an unwieldy box of red and yellow flowers that was clearly too heavy for her to lift. At that time of day there were few people around, and Ezio had always found it difficult to resist a damsel in distress. "Can I lend you a hand?" he asked, coming up to her. She smiled at him. "Yes, you're just the man I need. My gardener was supposed to pick these up for me, but his wife's sick, so he had to go home. As I was passing this way, I thought I'd fetch them. But this box is way too heavy for me. Do you think you could—" "Of course." Ezio stooped and hefted the box onto his shoulder. "So many flowers. You're a lucky woman." "Even luckier now that I've run into you." There was no doubt that she was flirting with him. "You could have asked your husband to fetch them for you, or one of your other servants," he said. "I have only one other servant, and she isn't half as strong as I am," replied the woman. "And as for a husband, I have none." "I see." "I ordered these flowers for Claudia Auditore's birthday." The woman looked at him. "That sounds like fun." "It will be." She paused. "In fact, if you'd like to help me out some more, I'm looking for someone with a bit of class to escort me to the party."
"Do you think I have enough class?"
She was bolder now. "Yes. No one in this entire town walks with greater bearing than you, sir. I'm sure Claudia's brother, Ezio himself, would be impressed." Ezio smiled. "You flatter me. But what do you know of this Ezio?" "Claudia, who is a particular friend of mine, thinks the world of him. But he rarely visits her, and from what I can gather, he's rather distant." Ezio decided it was time to come clean. "It's true, alas, I have been distant." The woman gasped. "Oh no, you are Ezio. I don't believe it. Claudia did say you were expected back. The party's supposed to be a surprise for her. Promise you won't say a word." "You'd better tell me who you are now." "Oh, of course. I am Angelina Ceresa. Now promise." "What will you do to keep me quiet?" She looked at him archly. "Oh, I'm sure I can think of several things." "I'm longing to hear what they are." They had reached the door of Angelina's house by this time. Angelina's elderly housekeeper opened it to them, and Ezio placed the box of flowers on a stone bench in the courtyard. He faced Angelina and smiled. "Now, are you going to tell me?" "Later." "Why not now?" "Signore, I assure you it will be worth the wait." Little did either of them know that events would overtake them, and that they would not meet again. Ezio took his leave and, seeing that the day was drawing in, directed his walk back towards the citadel. As he was approaching the stables, he noticed a little girl wandering down the middle of the street, apparently alone. He was about to speak to her when he was interrupted by the sound of frantic shouting and the thunder of horses' hooves. Quicker than thought, he snatched up the child and moved her to the shelter of a doorway. He was in the nick of time, too, as around the corner galloped a powerful war-horse, fully harnessed but riderless. In less than hot pursuit, and on foot, came Mario's stable-master, an elderly man called Federico, whom Ezio recognized.
"Torna qui, maledetto cavallo!"
yelled Federico helplessly after the disappearing horse. Seeing Ezio, he said,
"Can you help me, please, sir? It's your uncle's favourite steed. I was just about to unsaddle and groom him, but something must have scared him. He's very highly strung."
"Don't worry, I'll try and get him back for you."
Thank you, thank you."
Federico mopped his brow.
"I'm getting too old for this."
"Don't worry, just stay here and keep an eye on this child. I think she's lost."
"Surely."
Ezio raced off after the horse, which he found without difficulty. It had calmed down and was grazing on some hay that had been loaded onto a parked wagon. It balked slightly when Ezio approached, but then recognized him and didn't run. Ezio laid a comforting hand on its neck and patted it reassuringly before taking its bridle and leading it gently back the way they had come. On the way, he had the opportunity to do another good deed when he encountered a young woman, frantic with anxiety, who turned out to be the mother of the lost little girl. Ezio explained what had happened, taking care to tone down the degree of danger the little girl had been in. Once he'd told her where the girl was, she ran ahead of him, calling out her child's name. "Sophia! Sophia!" And Ezio heard an answering cry of "Mamma!" Minutes later, he had rejoined the little group and handed the reins over to Federico, who, thanking him again, begged him not to say anything to Mario. Ezio promised not to, and Federico led the horse back to the stables. The mother was still waiting with her daughter, and Ezio turned to them with a smile. "She wants to say thank you," said the mother. "Thank you," said Sophia dutifully, looking up at him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Stay with your mother in future," said Ezio kindly. "Don't leave her like that. Capisco?" The little girl nodded mutely. "We'd be lost without you and your family to watch over us, signore," said the mother. "We do what we can," Ezio said. But his thoughts were troubled as he entered the citadel. Even though he was pretty sure he could stand his ground, he wasn't looking forward to his encounter with Machiavelli. There was still time enough before the meeting, so to avoid brooding on the course it might take, and from natural curiosity, Ezio climbed the ramparts to take a closer look at the new cannon Mario had installed, and of which he was so proud. There were several of them, all beautifully chased in cast bronze, and each with a pile of iron cannonballs neatly stacked beside its wheels. The biggest cannon had barrels 10 feet long, and Mario had told him that these weighed as much as 20,000 pounds. But there were also lighter, more easily manoeuvrable culverins interspersed with them. In the towers that punctuated the walls were Saker cannon on cast iron mounts, as well as lightweight falconets on wooden trolleys. Ezio approached a group of gunners who were clustered round one of the bigger guns. "Handsome beasts," he said, running a hand over the elaborately chased decoration around the touch-hole. "Indeed they are, Messer Ezio," said the leader of the group, a rough-hewn master sergeant whom Ezio remembered from his first visit to Monteriggioni as a young man. "I heard you practicing earlier. May I try firing one of these?" "You can indeed, but we were firing the smaller cannon earlier. These big uns are brand new. We don't seem to have got the trick of loading them yet, and the master armourer who's supposed to be installing them seems to have taken off." "Have you got people looking for him?" "Indeed we have, sir, but no luck so far." "I'll have a look round too. After all, these things aren't here for decoration, and you never know how soon we'll need them." Ezio set off, continuing his rounds of the ramparts. He hadn't got more than another 20 or 30 yards when he heard a loud grunting from a wooden shed that had been erected on the top of one of the towers. Nearby, outside, lay a box of tools, and as he approached, the grunts resolved themselves into snores. It was dark and hot inside the shed, and smelled appallingly of stale wine. As his eyes grew accustomed to the dim light, Ezio quickly made out the form of a large man in his none-too-clean shirt-sleeves spread-eagled on a pile of straw. He gave the man a gentle kick, but its only effect was to make the man splutter, come half awake, then turn over with his face to the wall. "Salve, messere," Ezio said, jostling the man again, less gently this time, with the toe of his boot. The man twisted his head round to look at him and opened one eye. "What is it, friend?" "We need you to fix the new cannon on the battlements." "Not today, chum. First thing." "Are you too drunk to do your job?" "I don't think Captain Mario would be very happy if he got wind of that." "No more work today." "But it's not that late. Do you know what time it is?" "No, don't care either. Make cannon, not clocks." Ezio had squatted down to speak to the man, who in turn had pulled himself into a sitting position and was treating Ezio to a gale of his breath, pungent with garlic and cheap Montalcino, as he belched luxuriously. Ezio drew himself to his feet. "We need those cannon ready to be fired, and we need them ready now," he said. "Do you want me to find someone else who's more capable than you?" The man scrambled to his feet. "Not so fast, friend. No other man's going to lay a hand on my guns." He leaned on Ezio as he got his breath back. "You don't know what it's like. Some of these soldiers, they got no respect for artillery. Newfangled stuff for a lot of them, of course, grant you that. But I ask you, they expect a gun to work like magic, just like that. No sense of coaxing a good performance out of them." "Can we talk as we walk?" said Ezio. "Time isn't standing still, you know." "Mind you," the Master Armourer continued, "these things we've got here, they're in a class of their own. Nothing but the best for Captain Mario. But they're still pretty simple. I've got hold of a French design for a handheld gun. They call it a wrought-iron murderer. Very clever. Just think, handheld cannon. That's the future, chum." By now they were approaching the group surrounding the cannon. "You can call off the hunt," said Ezio cheerfully. "Here he is." The Master Sergeant eyed the armourer narrowly. "Up to it, is he?" "I may be a little the worse for wear," retorted the armourer, "but I am a peaceful man at heart. In these times, encouraging the sleeping warrior in my gut is the only way to stay alive. Therefore, it is my duty to drink." He pushed the sergeant aside. "Let's see what we've got here." After examining the cannon for a few moments, the Master Armourer rounded on the soldiers. "What have you been doing? You've been tampering with them, haven't you? Thank God you didn't fire one. You could have got us all killed. They're not ready yet. Got to give the bores a good clean first." "Perhaps with you around we won't need cannon after all," the sergeant told him. "We'll just get you to breathe on the enemy." But the armourer was busy with a cleaning rod and wads of coarse, oily cotton. When he'd finished, he stood up and eased his back. "There, that's done it," he said. Turning to Ezio, he continued, "Just get these fellas to load her. That's something they can do, though God knows it took them long enough to learn, and you can have a go. Look over there on the hill. We set some targets up on a level with this gun. Start by aiming at something on the same level. That way, if the cannon explodes, at least it won't take your head off with it." "Sounds reassuring," said Ezio. "Just try it, messer. Here's the fuse." Ezio placed the slow match on the touch hole. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he sprang back as the cannon bucked and roared. Looking across to the targets, he could see that his ball had shattered one of them. "Well done," said the armourer. "Perfetto."
At least one person here, apart from me, knows how to shoot.
Ezio had the men reload and fired again, but this time he missed.
Can't win 'em all, said the armourer. Come back at dawn. We'll be practising again then, and it'll give you a chance to get your eye in.
I will, said Ezio, little realizing that when he next fired a cannon, it would be in deadly earnest. Chapter 5. When Ezio entered the great hall of Mario's citadel, the shadows of evening were already gathering, and servants were beginning to light torches and candles to dispel the gloom. The gloom accorded with Ezio's increasingly sombre mood as the hour of the meeting approached. So wrapped up in his own thoughts was he that he didn't at first notice the person hovering by the massive fireplace, her slight but strong figure dwarfed by the giant caryatids that flanked the chimney. So he was startled when the woman approached him and touched his arm. As soon as he recognized her, his features softened into an expression of pure pleasure. "Buonasera, Ezio," she said, a little shyly for her, he thought. "Buonasera, Caterina," he replied, bowing to the Countess of Forli. Their former intimacy was some way in the past, though neither of them had forgotten it. And when she'd touched his arm, both of them, Ezio thought, had felt the chemistry of the moment. "Claudia told me you were here, and I've been looking forward to seeing you. But," he hesitated, "Monteriggioni is far from Forli, and you needn't flatter yourself that I've come all this way just on your account," she said, with a trace of her former sharpness, though he could see by her smile that she was not entirely serious. It was then he realized he was still drawn to this fiercely independent and dangerous woman. "I am always willing to be of service to you, Madonna, in any way I can." He meant it. "Some ways are harder than others," she countered, and now there was a tough note in her voice. "What is it?" "It is not a simple matter," continued Caterina Sforza. "I come in search of an alliance." "Tell me more." "I'm afraid your work is not over yet, Ezio. The papal armies are marching on Forli. My dominion is small, but fortunately, or unfortunately for me, it lies in an area of the utmost strategic importance to whomever controls it." "And you desire my help?" "My forces on their own are weak. Your condottieri would be a great asset to my cause." "This is something I will have to discuss with Mario." "He will not refuse me." "And nor will I." "By helping me, you will not just be doing me a good deed. You will be taking a stand against the forces of evil against which we have always been united." As they spoke, Mario appeared.
"Ezio, Contessa, we are gathered and await you," he said, his face unusually serious. "We will talk more of this," Ezio told her. "I am bidden to a meeting which my uncle has convened. I am expected to explain myself, I think. But let us arrange to see each other afterwards." "The meeting concerns me too," said Caterina. "Shall we go in?" Chapter 6. The room was very familiar to Ezio. There, on the now exposed inner wall, the pages of the great codex were arranged in order. The desk, usually littered with maps, was cleared, and around it, on severe, straight-backed chairs of dark wood, sat those members of the assassin Brotherhood who had gathered at Monteriggioni, together with those of the Auditore family who were privy to its cause. Mario sat behind his desk, and at one end sat the sober, dark-suited man, still young-looking, but with deep lines of thought etched into his forehead, who had become one of Ezio's closest associates, as well as one of his most unremitting critics, Niccolò Machiavelli. The two men nodded guardedly at one another, as Ezio greeted Claudia and his mother, Maria Auditore, matriarch of the family since his father's death.
Maria hugged her only surviving son hard, as if her life depended on it, and looked at him with shining eyes as he broke free and took a seat near Caterina and opposite Machiavelli, who now rose and looked questioningly at him. Clearly there was going to be no polite prologue to the matter in hand. "First, perhaps, I owe you an apology," began Machiavelli. "I was not present in the vault, and urgent business took me to Florence before I could truly analyse what happened there. Mario has given us his account, but yours alone can be the full one." Ezio rose and spoke simply and directly. "I entered the Vatican, where I encountered Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, and confronted him. He was in possession of one of the pieces of Eden, the staff, and used it against me. I managed to defeat him and, using the combined powers of the apple and the staff, gained access to the secret vault, leaving him outside. He was in despair and begged me to kill him. I would not." Ezio paused. "What then?" prompted Machiavelli, as the others watched silently. "Within the vault were many strange things. Things not dreamt of in our world." Visibly moved, Ezio forced himself to continue in level tones. "A vision of the goddess Minerva appeared to me. She told of a terrible tragedy that would befall mankind at some future time, but she also spoke of lost temples which may, when found, aid us and lead us to a kind of redemption. She appeared to invoke a phantom, which had some close connection with me, but what that was I cannot tell. After her warning and predictions, she vanished. I emerged to see the Pope dying, or so it seemed. He appeared to have taken poison. Later, something compelled me to return. I seized the apple, but the staff, which may have been another piece of Eden, was swallowed up by the earth. I am glad of it. The apple alone, which I have given in custody to Mario, is already more than I personally wish to have responsibility for." "Amazing," cried Caterina. "I cannot imagine such wonders," added Claudia. "So the vault did not house the terrible weapon we feared. Or at any rate, the Templars did not gain control of it. This at least is good news," said Machiavelli evenly. "What of this goddess, Minerva?" Claudia asked. "Did she appear like us?" "Her appearance was human, and also superhuman," Ezio said. "Her words proved that she belonged to a race far older and greater than ours. The rest of her kind died many centuries ago. She had been waiting for that moment for a long time. I wish I had the words to describe the magic she performed." "What are these temples she spoke of?" put in Mario. "I know not." "Did she say we should search for them? How do we know what to look for?" "Perhaps we should. Perhaps the quest will show us the way." "The quest must be undertaken," said Machiavelli crisply. "But we must clear the path for it first. Tell us of the Pope. He did not die, you say?" "When I returned to the vault, his cope lay on the chapel floor. He himself had disappeared." "Had he made any promises? Had he shown repentance?" "Neither. He was bent on gaining the power. When he saw he was not going to get it, he collapsed." "And you left him to die?" "I would not be the one to kill him." "You should have done so." "I'm not here to debate the past. I stand by my decision. Now we should discuss the future, what we are to do." What we are to do is made all the more urgent by your failure to finish off the Templar leader when you had the chance. Machiavelli breathed hard, but then relaxed a little. All right, Ezio. You know in what high esteem we all hold you. We would not have got anything like this far without the 20 years' devotion you have shown to the Assassin Brotherhood and our creed. And a part of me applauds you for not having killed when you deemed it unnecessary to do so. That is also in keeping with our code of honour. But you misjudged, my friend, and that means we have an immediate and dangerous task ahead of us. He paused, scanning the assembled company with eagle eyes. Our spies in Rome report that Rodrigo is indeed a reduced threat. He is at least somewhat broken in spirit. There is a saying that it is less dangerous to do battle with a lion's whelp than with an old, dying lion. But in the case of the Borgia, the position is quite otherwise. Rodrigo's son, Cesare, is the man we must match ourselves against now. Armed with the vast fortune the Borgia have amassed by fair means and foul, but mostly foul, here Machiavelli allowed himself a wry smile, he heads a large army of highly trained troops, and with it he intends to take over all Italy, the whole peninsula, and he does not intend to stop at the borders of the Kingdom of Naples.
He would never dare. He could never do it,
Mario roared. He would, and he could, snapped Machiavelli. He is evil through and through, and as dedicated a Templar as his father the Pope ever was. But he is also a fine, though utterly ruthless, soldier. He always wanted to be a soldier, even after his father made him Cardinal of Valencia when he was only 17 years old. As we all know, he resigned from that post, making him the first cardinal in the Church's history to do so. The Borgia treat our country and the Vatican as if they were their own private fiefdom. Cesare's plan now is to crush the north first, to subdue the Romagna and isolate Venice. He also intends to extirpate and destroy all of us remaining assassins, since he knows that in the end we are the only people who can stop him. Aut Caesar, aut nihil. That's his motto. Either you're with me, or you're dead. And you know, I think the madman actually believes it. My uncle mentioned a sister, Ezio began. Machiavelli turned to him. Yes, Lucrezia. She and Cesare are, how shall I say, very close. They are a very close-knit family. When they are not killing those other brothers and sisters, husbands and wives whom they find inconvenient to them, they are coupling with each other. Maria Auditore could not suppress a cry of disgust. We must approach them with all the caution we would use to approach a nest of vipers, Machiavelli concluded, and God knows where and how soon they will next strike. He paused and drank half a glass of wine. And now, Mario, I leave you. Ezio, we will meet again soon, I trust.
You're leaving this evening?
Time is of the essence, good Mario. I ride for Rome tonight. Farewell. The room was silent once Machiavelli had left. After a long pause, Ezio said bitterly, "He blames me for not killing Rodrigo when I had the chance." He looked round at them. "You all do." "Any of us might have made the decision you made," said his mother. "You were sure he was dying." Mario came and put an arm round his shoulders.
Machiavelli knows your value. We all do. And even with the Pope out of the way, we'd still have had to deal with his brood.
But if I had cut off the head, could the body have survived?
We must deal with the situation as it is, good Ezio, not with it as it might have been.
Mario clapped him on the back.
And now, as we are in for a busy day tomorrow, I suggest we dine and prepare for an early night.
Caterina's eyes met Ezio's. Did he imagine it, or was there a flicker of lust there? He shrugged inwardly. Perhaps he was just imagining it. Chapter 7. Ezio ate lightly, just pollo ripieno with roasted vegetables, and he drank his Chianti cut half and half with water. There was little conversation at dinner, and he answered his mother's string of questions politely but laconically. After all the tension that had mounted in anticipation of the meeting, and which had now melted away, he was very tired. He had barely had a chance to rest since leaving Rome, and it looked now as if it would be a long time still before he could realize his long-cherished ambition of spending some time back in his old home in Florence, reading and walking in the surrounding gentle hills. As soon as he decently could, Ezio made his excuses to the company and set off for his bedroom, a large, quiet, dimly lit space on one of the upper floors, with a view across the countryside rather than the town. Once he'd reached it and dismissed the servant, he let go of the steeliness that had supported him throughout the day. His body slumped, his shoulders sagged, and his walk eased. His movements were slow and deliberate. He moved across the room to where the servant had already drawn him a bath. As he approached it, he tugged at his boots and took off his clothes and, once naked, he stood for a moment, his clothes bundled in his hands, before a full-length mirror on a stand near the copper tub. He looked at his reflection with weary eyes. Where had the last 4 long decades gone? He straightened. He was older, stronger even, certainly wiser, but he could not deny the profound fatigue he felt. Ezio threw his clothes onto the bed. Under it, in a locked elm chest, were the secret codex weapons that Leonardo da Vinci had fashioned for him. He would check them over first thing in the morning, after the council of war he'd be holding with his uncle. The original hidden blade never left him, except when he was naked, and even then he kept it within arm's reach. He wore it always. It had become part of his body. Sighing with relief, Ezio slipped into the bath. Immersed up to his neck in the hot water, breathing in the gently scented steam, he closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath of relief. Peace at last. He had better make the most of the few short hours he had of it. He had just dozed off and begun to dream when the softest of noises, the door opening and closing behind its heavy tapestry hanging, caused him to wake. He was instantly alert, like a wild animal. Silently, his hand sought the blade, and with a practised movement, he attached it to his wrist. Then, in one fluid motion, he turned and stood upright in the tub, poised for action and looking in the direction of the door. "Well," said Caterina, grinning as she approached, "you certainly haven't lost any inches with the years." "You have the advantage of me, Contessa," smiled Ezio. "You are fully clothed. I expect we could arrange something to change that. But I am waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to say that you don't really need to see for yourself. For you to say that you are sure, even without seeing my naked body, that nature has been as kind to me, if not kinder, as she has been to you." Her grin broadened at Ezio's confusion. "But I remember you were never as good at paying compliments as you were at ridding the world of Templars. Come here." He drew her to him, pulling at the girdle of her skirt as her fingers flew first to the blade, detaching it, and then to the laces of her bodice. Seconds later, he had lifted her into the bath with him, their lips glued to one another's, and their naked limbs entwined. They did not linger long in the bath, but soon got out, drying each other on the rough linen towels the servant had left. Caterina had brought a phial of scented massage oil with her, and drew it from a pocket in her dress. Now lie on the bed, she said. I want to make sure you're good and ready for me. Surely you can see that I am. Indulge me. Indulge yourself. Ezio smiled. This was better than sleep. Sleep could wait. Sleep, Ezio found, was obliged to wait 3 hours, at which point Caterina curled up in his arms. She fell asleep before him, and he watched her for a while. Nature had indeed been kind to her. Her slender yet curvaceous body, with its narrow hips, broad shoulders, and small but perfect breasts, was still that of a 20-year-old, and her cloud of fine light red hair that tickled his chest as she laid her head on it carried the same scent that had driven him wild all those years ago. Once or twice in the depths of the night he woke to find he had rolled away from her, and when he took her in his arms again, she nestled up to him without waking, giving a tiny sigh of joy and closing her hand around his forearm. Ezio wondered later if this hadn't been the best night of love in his life. They overslept, of course, but Ezio was not about to forego another bout in favour of cannon practice, even though a part of his mind reproved him for this. In the background he could distantly hear the sounds of marching, clattering men moving at a running march, and shouted orders followed by the boom of cannon. Target practice with the new cannon, said Ezio, when, for a moment, Caterina stopped and looked at him quizzically. Manoeuvres. Mario's a hard taskmaster. The heavy brocade curtains across the windows shut out most of the light, and the room remained cocooned in comfortable dimness. No servant came to disturb them. Soon Caterina's moans of pleasure drowned out any other noise to his ear. His hands tightened around her strong buttocks, and she was pulling him up urgently towards her when their love-making was interrupted by more than just the roar of cannon. Suddenly the peace and the softness of the room was shattered. The windows blew away with a mighty roar, taking a part of the stone outer wall with them, as a gigantic cannonball smashed in and landed, boiling hot, inches from the bed. The floor sagged under its weight. Ezio had instinctively thrown himself protectively over Caterina at the first sign of danger, and in that moment the lovers transformed themselves into professionals and colleagues. If they were to remain lovers, they first had to survive. They leapt from the bed, throwing on their clothes. Ezio noticed that apart from the delicious phial of oil, Caterina touted a very useful jagged-edged dagger beneath her skirts. "What the hell?" Ezio cried. "Go and find Mario," said Caterina urgently. Another ball flew in, shattering the beams over their recently vacated bed and smashing it to pieces. "My troops are in the main courtyard," said Caterina. "I'll find them and get around the back of the citadel to see if we can't outflank them."